Thank you very much and for the invitation. And I'm definitely a resuscitation meeting virgin. I don't really know anything about resuscitation, but I'll tell you a story that brings some messages, but also tells you a little bit about physiology. This is kind of a little bit of a personal journey. It has nothing to do with my day job. I work down at Little France, a couple of miles from here. I'm a discovery scientist, so I try and find discoveries and put them into help cardiovascular patients. But this is my son George and my daughter Serena. And I'll tell you a little bit about shallow water blackout, which I knew absolutely zilch about until about 2 or 3 years ago. So I was really privileged in the end. This is published at the tail end of last year. It's a collaboration between myself, Hugh Montgomery from UCL, Mike Tipton from Portsmouth University, Joe Talbot, Royal Lifesaving Society, RNLI, Swim England, etc., to try and bring together a few things from a fragmented guidance and fragmented information into a single document that talks about lived stories. I think they're really important, and that's where I come in, to understand the physics and physiology of what happens with a hypoxic blackout, and then guidance around prevention, which seems to be the key thing, as well as rescue, resuscitation, etc., and treatment. But the only way, I've only got one way of telling the story, and that's exactly how it happened. So I've got a privilege. I've got 5 kids. I always say 3 biologically, 5 legally. 3 from my first marriage. They're all grown up, George, Serena, and an elder sister, Olivia. I'm remarried. My wife is Dutch. So like the rest of the Netherlands, you don't fly on holiday. When you go on holiday, you drive south. There's a mass exodus with caravans, etc. So we do that. And I always try and entice my kids to come. And they always say, well, where are you going, before they make a decision. And so we always try and find somewhere nice. And this place is near Montpellier, called Gradois. We've been there before, and it's a cool place. It's really nice. And they have this centerpiece of this pool, which is about 40 meters in length. This is just a picture from the website. So there are 4 of us there. My eldest daughter's a doctor. She didn't have time to come. But my Serena was a medical student at the time, and George at university. They had plenty of time in the summer to come and enjoy time with us. So this is a pool. In there is my non-biological son. This is Jasper, my daughter Serena, my wife. This is just really great. We had a GoPro doing lots of underwater stuff and enjoying the time. In the pool, just a disclaimer, it does say at the sign, at the entrance, there's no life-saving guard, no lifeguard, which is fine and obviously quite common at the time. So what actually happened halfway through the holiday, this is just a little scenario planning I did, which is exactly the way it happened. People in black are people just chilling in the pool. It's just after lunch. George and I being very competitive with each other and elsewhere, and all my friends and family, a bit competitive in the pool, right? How far can you go underwater? Serena is just chilling at the side in green, listening to music, falling asleep. And George and I basically do, how far can we swim underwater? It's 40 meters, so quite a length, so we thought we'll try it. So we did 3 attempts. We went exactly 25 meters, so to about here. And then we went back pretty quickly, tried again, 25 meters, went back again pretty quickly, 25 meters. So after 3 attempts, I got a bit bored, and I thought I'll get out. So I sat next to Serena, and then George, being pretty competitive, saying he wants to beat his record and wants to beat me, basically, rather than beat himself. So he went back, he did a 4th attempt, 25 meters. And this time, he said, I'm going to go 1 more time. So he went back, and he started hyperventilating this time. So he did his breathing exercises. So just rewind, 2 years before that, I've been on another holiday, and all 3 of my kids came that time, which was great. And also the now husband of my eldest daughter came as well. So he was doing this weird thing in the pool in the villa where he would do a bit of a warm version of the Wim Hof method. So he would hyperventilate and submerge. So he did that, and he was down in the pool at the bottom of the pool for about 10 minutes. So I thought this was really a bit weird. But George also started doing it during the course of the holiday. And he'd be down there for 5 or 6 minutes. I thought it was a bit weird, but I didn't want to interfere. Anyway, he was doing the same sort of principle here on his final attempt. And essentially then, he launched himself, and he went about 30, 35 meters. And then I'm watching, thankfully, I'm watching him at the side, okay, trying to sort of egg him on and hopefully beat his time. And I saw, because I'm next to Serena here, and he's gone that way, I saw the back of his head come out of the water, and I thought, he's got oxygen, he's going to go back down again and get to the end of the pool. But he didn't. So he went back down again, and in hindsight, retrospectively, his mouth hadn't come and got any oxygen. He went back down, and he's just started meandering around and then just stopped. So thankfully I was watching, so that sort of alarm bells, and then so, a bit freaked out, of course, I went into the pool, and basically, a bit like the movies, when I got there, he was lying, facing up, eyes open, completely motionless. I don't remember, so we're right at the edge of the pool here at the top. I don't remember actually getting him out at all. I'm not a strong guy, but I got him out in a single, in a oneer. I had 2 really crap hips at the time, and for me to get out of the pool, I could never do it, but I leaped out of the pool after him. So this was all very quick. At that point, I thought, shit, I never did CPR training. So I had that thought very quickly. But I did check, he had no pulse, he was blue, and he definitely wasn't breathing, his heart had stopped. So I went straight to chest compressions, I did that. Thankfully, my daughter, who was listening to stuff on her iPod, actually, almost asleep, she had sensed something was happening. She had CPR training as part of her medical degree. She was 5th-year student at the time. So she launched herself around the edge of the pool. She shouted to get emergency services to someone who, because there's a restaurant there, she came round. And then she checked his airways, put his chin back, and started CPR and we alternated a little bit with the chest compressions, but still nothing happened for a couple of minutes. So I think it was about 4 minutes or so he hadn't basically had any oxygen. At that point, some water did come out of his mouth. He started to come round. I've never experienced anyone in this situation at all, and then he came round, and then immediately, for the next couple of minutes, it was obvious he was completely brain dead. I mean, he was just one eye that way, one eye that way, and making some horrible growling noises. A nurse who we'd been walking past had come by, kept him calm, and my daughter sort of spooned him to keep him calm. And he did start to come around very quickly. So within, I don't know, a 5-minute period, he'd gone from essentially dead to brain dead to actually coherent. And by 10 minutes, when emergency services finally arrived, he did know who he was. He did know his name. He did know who I was and his date of birth and all that sort of stuff. So he made a pretty quick recovery, which was great. So they blue lighted him to Nîmes. He spent 4 days in a cardiology ward. They were brilliant. They did every test under the sun, no cardiac abnormalities whatsoever. When he came back to Scotland, the team in Glasgow also checked him out, genetic tests, and nothing at all. So this was a bit of a mystery why it happened. So we went down at BHF. I'm a BHF professor, not being CPR trained, bad message. My bad, completely quite open about saying that. I mean, I thought about it for 40 years, but never did it. It was really, really sad. Everyone I've told this story to was not being CPR trained, is now CPR trained. My whole lab and everyone associated with that. So we did help the BHF. I'm not sure the conflict between cushions and mannequins and stuff, but BHF have this Reviver app. So George and I helped launch that in Scotland. All schools were getting this training or something, but they did it at Craigmont School, which is quite close to here. And they did that because there's a guy called Brodie, a bit like the first talk, who he'd saved his dad's life. He's a pupil at the school. He'd been given CPR training by his teacher. not part of the curriculum, just on a sort of an afternoon where the teacher thought that'd be a great idea, and saved his dad's life when he had a heart attack at home. So that's a really nice story. So we helped to launch that. But what had really happened to George, we didn't really understand that. So as a scientist, I really wanted to kind of understand that. So the worst thing I did is went to Google to tell me. But actually, there's this website. It's in the US, and they're very organized. And they have this cartoon here, which is exactly what happened to George. So hyperventilating, that changes your blood gases. That makes you, this is a danger signal for your blood gas balance when you're underwater, and the conflict between oxygen and your drive to breathe. And it's really clear, and Michael Phelps Foundation and everyone's involved in this, but everyone I had spoken to, hundreds of people, quite well connected professionally, no one had ever heard of this. So a cardiologist friend of mine said, well, this guy Hugh Montgomery at UCL, I think something happened to his son. So I got in contact with Hugh, we had a chat at the welcome, and it's really, we had a near tragedy, but this is a real tragedy. And very similar physiology. So his son Oscar and Hugh, they'd always been in the water, so they would hyperventilate at the surface, they would free dive, spearfishing, that sort of stuff. They always did it together. At the end of the pandemic, Hugh wasn't available, so Oscar went on his own and essentially died. So he had a hypoxic blackout, submerged about 10 meters. His body washed up about 3 weeks later. They saw the GoPro with his watch, etc. So this is a real tragedy, but it's the same concept about this conflict between your blood gases. So we decided we should do something about this. We spoke to Mike Tipton at Portsmouth, who brought all this together. He's works in the extreme environment, so he's a complete expert in all of this. And we came up with this publication that I showed you earlier to try and at least bring something back in terms of guidance in the same place. Because as I said, nobody I knew had ever heard of this, and many professionals. So we had this as lots of guidance. Anyone, including young, fit, usually males, because they're ultra competitive, at least in swim pools, young males, a bit like the car driving stuff, isn't it? They're the most prone, highest insurance. Can lose consciousness underwater. Education supervision will reduce the risk. Guidance is essential. Hyperventilation seems to be a key thing. There are, of course, dangers in the water anyway, but the hyperventilation seems to be a common denominator. So we came out with this, and if you're interested, read it. It's quite nice. The physiology, just very briefly, if you're swimming in the water, underwater, without hyperventilation, as you go through, you lose, you're consuming oxygen, of course, with your muscles as you're swimming. Your CO2, which drives your drive to breathe, comes up, and then naturally you come up for a breath. But if you override that, and some people, because they're so competitive, will, or coaches for professional swimmers or semi-professional swimmers doing these lung busters, where you just go underwater as far as you can, you repeat it, that just heightens that, and coaches completely ignore it. Secondly, if you're trying to, like George did, exactly as George did, when you're trying to beat your time, you basically have to, you lower your CO2, and that means that your drive to breathe, the threshold isn't reached early enough before your oxygen depletes, and you become unconscious. And this is very real. It gets a bit more complicated with the diving because you've got pressure from the water, but essentially, again, if you hyperventilate at the surface, this picture at the surface, you lower your CO2. As you descend, when your alveoli constrict, that elevates your CO2 and your oxygen in your blood. If you stay down there during your breath hold, this reduces, but probably not enough for the CO2 to get your drive to breathe. And so this is the danger point. And of course, as well known, when you dive and you go back up and your alveoli relax again, you can have a rapid loss of oxygen. And this is particularly what happened to Oscar. And very finally, this is quite important implications. This was a case last year, actually, a kid in Northern Ireland who was a very sort of semi-professional swimmer. he was going up and down the water, underwater, and at the end of that, he submerged, and that was what he did normally, and just stayed down under the water for a little bit. 3 lifeguards on duty, they all thought that was normal. That was his normal practice. But he stayed down there, and he died. And they tried to sue the lifeguards, but it wasn't part of their training. That's what he'd normally done. So this does kill people. What I think is important is guidance. When you go to a swimming pool, everybody knows before they go into a swimming pool, don't dive into the shallow end, right? Don't be a muppet. You're going to bang your head. And there's guidance when you go into the swimming pool that says, don't dive in, you're going to bang your head. But there's nothing in any swimming pool in the UK about breath holds. Okay, nothing at all. So that is the task at the moment, is to improve the guidance around that. I just made this for RLSS when I gave a talk there recently. All you need is some signage. This was created in 30 seconds by Google Gemini. So just a little bit of awareness about don't do extended breath holds, don't hyperventilate. If you're going to do it, somebody needs to know about it, and you need a buddy. So after all of this, the still points are hypoxic blackout is pretty rare. Not that many people drown in the UK every year, but it's way too many. Every single one is preventable. But it's devastating. Most people who have a hypoxic blackout die. The numbers are around 90%. And a lot of that is in the US and places where you have a pool in the back garden and you're swimming on your own. So the majority of people die. Outside the swimming community, no one's got a clue about any of this, any of the physiology, any of the danger. So we need to up that guidance because it's entirely preventable. And that's the story. And I did do formal CPR training after that. And thank you for listening to me anyway.